Hey everyone, this is the I Have No Idea What I'm Doing podcast, a show about women doing business in Africa. And I'm your host, the chief of not knowing, Paula based out of Kenya. Today is August 18th. Y'all, this past week was one of those weeks that just rocked my world so hard. It was the type of week where I was questioning my very existence, to be dramatic, but it's true. You know, there's just some things, milestones that happen that just rock you. Well, I had one of those, and it was to the point where I had to clear my schedule, to take a step back and just consider myself. It was one of those. And I'm still rocky and shaky and licking my wounds. But I had to show up for the pod. I had to show up today. And in order to do so, there's a quote that got me through the really worst part of last week. And it was about following your instincts. And I've talked about this before. Obviously, this is an issue for me. I listen to Oprah in general, but when I start listening to Super Soul Sunday and reading her books, that's when you know, Paula has reached a new level. And that was me these last few days. And I was listening to Oprah, a Super Soul Sunday episode where she talks about your body and the world is always whispering to you. And her concept was that if you don't listen to the whispers, it will eventually become a nudge, and then it will become a shout, and then eventually it will knock you out if you're not listening, right? And she was telling you to always listen to the whispers. And there was a particular whisper that I've been ignoring for some time that eventually knocked me out. And man, I really ignored those particular whispers, and I'm still even beating myself up about it. But I'm really happy to show up here today. Like I always say, this is one of my favorite parts of the week. And thank you, all of you, for listening to the last two episodes. That was just me solo dolo, talking about the mistakes I'd made with my business in the last 2 years. So I hope that helps someone somewhere one day. I don't know. This goes into the ether, and sometimes I don't know who's listening or what, but I hope this one day helps someone. And before we jump into today's content for the episode, I wanted to share something that I was thinking about. I'm actually thinking of teaching an online course on podcasting and everything you need to know to go from basically zero to your trailer, or at least your first episode. It's been in my spirit to want to work on it. And I don't want to just teach a class about podcasting. I really want to, how I feel about women and women entrepreneurs. So I think I would actually like to cater this course to you, the listeners, women who are entrepreneurs or have businesses or side hustles. I want to teach you how to develop a podcast as part of a marketing tool for your business or for you or for whatever expertise you have, because this is one of the strongest digital marketing tools out there that people are not using in Kenya or even in Africa. And I really want to show you how you can do that. So basically, this is a course that would take you from zero to a trailer of your podcast. And then along the way, I'd help you gain the confidence and the skills to create, record, edit, and release the podcast with the tools and production plans that's necessary for success. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'm saying this on the fly, but if you're interested, can you actually email me info@kali.media. That's info@kali.media. And the email will also be in the show notes. And just get back to me if you let me know you're interested. And if enough women are into it, I'll put something out there and produce something for you. And so tell a friend as well. Anyone who's interested in podcasting, this is something I'm thinking of doing. Okay, so this week, I'm excited to get into this week. This week, we're back with a new interview, and it's an interview with an old friend of the podcast. And anyone who's listened to all the episodes know this person, because I'm speaking with Pat Okelo, who I call the Queen of Connections. Among the many things she does, here's a list. She is the founder of Willart Production, which is a graphic design company that's been around for 20 years. She's the founder of Conference in a Box, which is an events company. She's the co-author of a Candid handbook for women doing business in Kenya. She's the creator of Candid Conversations, Circles for Women in Business. This is a very popular meetup for business women and entrepreneurs in Nairobi. And then lastly, of what I'm willing to talk about today, because she does so much more, she's the founder of Kayana, which is a hub and community of female entrepreneurs of abundance that come together to move their businesses from ideation to startup. Why did I bring Pat back? Like I mentioned, I interviewed Pat in season 1, and I interviewed her. If you want to go listen to it, it was a mini episode, so episode 5.5. I first connected with her when I was still living in the US and considering moving back to Kenya. And then she released this book, a Candid handbook for women doing business in Kenya. And I was thinking of starting my own business and moving back to Kenya. And here was someone who had put together a blueprint. I was like, I need to connect with her. She was very nice enough to send me the book. And then she was my first interview ever for the podcast. And so when I moved back to Kenya, we connected, and she's been a great friend and mentor since then. When I interviewed her, she had just released the book. But in the years since, and it has not been that long, she launched the Candid Conversations events that I mentioned, as well as Kayana, the hub and community that I also mentioned, I think in the span of 2 to 3 years. I wanted to talk to her because Pat is an idea mammoth. She comes up with great ideas, but even better, she is an execution queen. And that's what this episode is about. It's about learning to be authentically yourself in business and how doing so ultimately leads to strong execution and a strong ecosystem of brands like the ones that she has. And she's just someone who, when I see how she manages and handles her businesses, I would really love the work that I'm doing to look like that years from now. And you'll notice my admiration dripping throughout this episode. And thank you again, Pat, for being on my podcast. I really appreciate having you.
You're welcome. And I'm really honored to be here a second time.
Yes, I'm really excited to talk today. Since we last talked, you've had some major business moves, including the Circles for Women in Business, as well as Kayana. Why don't you tell me at least about the Circles for Women in Business and Kayana and how those ideas for each came about?
I also needed to have listened to our last interview to know exactly at what point we were speaking.
Yeah.
But if it was before the book, then we did not have a book launch per se, like the usual way that people launch books, simply because I'm extremely introverted. And the idea of me standing in front of an audience and cutting a ribbon and launching a book and all that razzmatazz just I didn't resonate with that. And because I'm so strong on authenticity and being your authentic self, I just felt that I wouldn't excel. It may be a nice event, but it wouldn't really pass the real reason behind us doing the book in the first place. So I did not bend to the pressure of many of my contributors in the book were waiting for a book launch, which did not happen. But in September of 2017, when we were bang in the middle of, preparing for an election and etc., I had somebody who had received the book decided that, Patricia, we really need to host this. We need whatever you want. If you don't want to launch, you need to do something around the book. And she encouraged me to kind of visualize the kind of event that I felt would be appropriate for the book. And of course, I was thinking intimacy and candor go together. So perhaps maybe 25 women in a room and speaking about our different business journeys would be great, because if it's a small crowd, then people would be able to be authentic and true to themselves. But as it turned out, when the invites went out, we got over 50 women responding. And that was really the birth of Candid Conversations. So we had around, I think it was maybe 57 women attend. And that was the start of this journey of Circles for Women in Business that I call a movement now. We invite women in business to tell their authentic stories from a particular point of view. So it could be around finance, it could be around branding, it could be around the fact that they're, maybe single women. It could be just, we take one focal point and kind of like create the story around that. And then after that, we take a break midway through the event at around 8:30, and then we then go into smaller circles. So there's a real hunger for authentic meetings. We're very, very intentional about our networking because that's how we grow our businesses. But the more people you have on your contact list, the more customers you're able to generate from that. So we're very, very serious about that part of the funnel when it comes to networking.
The first time I went, I got a client and a job out of that event. I did. I don't know if I've ever told you that, Pat. I actually, now that I think about it, there's really a lot of opportunity. Of course, you're there to learn, but also to really actually genuinely network and in an authentic way. And I love that you brought up the word authenticity. Can you speak on finding authenticity within the work that you're doing?
So, Paula, I was one of these girls who never felt that they fitted in. I don't know, the feeling of a clique or a group. Or let me put it this way. Whenever I felt that I was trying to be somebody else is when my confidence was at its lowest. But when I was myself and only measuring myself against me, I felt that I had a lot of confidence going into whatever I was doing. So I felt that I really leaned into my authentic self when I was in my late 30s. And there was no looking back from there. And I always tell the story where I went for a training for entrepreneurs at Babson College in Boston. And one of the ladies who was a professor was leading the class and talking about why it's important for women to bring their full selves into the room. So now I had a PhD professor from Babson saying everything that I had deeply believed is important for women to embrace. And she had, of course, the data and statistics as to why it's important for us to come into the room with the fact that we are struggling with, our children, our babies not sleeping, all those things that we tend to say as corporate women, we leave them at the door so that we can come and do our job. And then when we're done, we'll pick up all the trash that's at the door and go home with it. And she was like, no, sometimes you really need to come into the room and say, I'm actually in a state of complete disorientation. So, this is where I am, but it doesn't mean that whatever I'm going to deliver is of less value. And we felt, and she, through her presentation, told us how women lead in this. This is actually the new way that women are leading. And we've seen it now with the Prime Minister of New Zealand going to, Parliament, being pregnant first and then having her child and going to Parliament with breastfeeding a child. And we're seeing how she's leading now during this COVID season. So there is another way in which women can excel and lead, but it requires us to be true to ourselves and true to our womanness. When you are authentic, then the confidence begins to come on board. And then from there, you start speaking up in large groups and eventually leadership positions. So it's all part of the journey for women in business.
While the Candid Conversations was growing and expanding in a very organic way, you decided to start Kayana. Can you explain what Kayana is?
Kayana being, as you know, the names of my two eldest children, Kaya and Diana. And that's really what birthed what I call the premier community for women in business in Nairobi. If you recall from the journey of the book, the idea has always been to bring together female entrepreneurs. So what happened was that we already got proof of concept in terms of there was a real need for women to gather and come together. Meanwhile, of course, I've been in business. This is my 20th year that I have been running Willart Productions, which is my design firm, and Concepts in a Box. This is our 8th year as a corporate events company. And we had invested a couple of years ago in a space that was now being handed back to us by the contractors. And at that time, when I looked around Nairobi, I found that the real estate market is really, what can I say, saturated.
Yeah.
So we knew, getting a tenant perhaps wasn't really the route to go. So one night, literally, I went to bed and we were going to get the keys in maybe 2 weeks' time. And I thought, we have a space where we can get these women together. Why don't they meet in this space that now belongs to me? And I was like, okay, fine. I thought about it. I remember waking up, writing in my notes and my notebook next to my bedside, the idea, and then going back to bed. And so I developed the idea further that day and decided, let me come and pitch it to my husband, who's also my business partner. And he was like, you know what, you should go for it. I'm happy to support you where I can. We opened our doors in April, end of April of 2019. And we currently have, the community is over 500 women and paid up membership of around 100 women.
And it's a beautiful, very, very beautiful space. And so for me, Pat, like when I think about the book, and then I think about Candid Conversations, which are this event that grew out of the book. And then I think about Kayana, which then grew out of the events and the book. Of course, there's like a through line there. You've basically created two and more businesses from an initial book, an initial need. But how do you keep coming up with these ideas, and where do they come from?
That's a good question, Paula, because it's something that I try to really encourage women and to do. So the first thing is, and I always say it as an entrepreneur, is that you are trying to meet a need. So you cannot say that I'm just doing something for the love of it. Yes, if it's intrinsic, then it's art, right? Then you can display it somewhere and that's it. But if you're trying to build a business around something that you love, then it has to be meeting a need. So in other words, if you are making beautiful quilted blankets because you love to do it, but want to earn a living from doing that, then you have to be open to listening to the other opinions on the product that you're creating. So if you fall in love with it so much that you're not willing to listen to anybody, then every Christmas or every birthday, you'll just be sending them out as gifts because nobody really resonates with the product. So one of the things that I learned very early is to receive feedback. Some people call it criticism. To learn to receive it, however painful it is. So we're all here. I believe we're all creative beings. Some of us are scared of of creating something because you're scared of it being rejected. So I don't suffer from that disease too much. Of course I'll be wounded if I create something that I love and nobody loves it. But if I'm really interested in solving a problem, then it's really, really important for me to be able to receive feedback. So I learned that quickly and early in my life that I'm not perfect and nothing that I'll produce will be perfect, but that doesn't stop us aiming for excellence. So I continue to aim for excellence, but for me to aim for excellence requires me to listen to what the market is telling me to do. So that's a big thing for me because I find many, many people, any criticism they feel about your product is about you, and being unable to separate the two will prevent growth. Having said that, as you begin to now receive criticism and listen to the market and listen to what the market is telling you, you'll find that there's a lot of need. You're an entrepreneur, remember? You're a creative. So as you journal and take the listen to what people are saying, you'll be like, you know what, I can actually solve that need really, really easily. Actually, I know the solution of that need. So you'll create the solution. It doesn't necessarily mean that you will then build a business around that, but you want to give that solution to the market, right? For them to solve the problem. So for example, I'm in packaging and branding. If I'm talking to a woman who's doing pickles and she's like, oh my gosh, I can never seem to get this packaging done right. It's such a struggle. And I'm like, oh man, I actually know this is what I do for a living. I'll connect you, or I'll look for somebody who can actually solve your problem for you. And if I find there's a business opportunity in that transaction, I don't think about that first. I'm like, let me solve the problem. Let me hear the feedback. For example, what you told me about circles, I know, okay, you mean people can actually meet and do business there. Then I think, is it something that I want to monetize, or is it something that I just want to continue to give, as value to the community? So that's, I think, is why I keep, creating products. And I believe this is something that everybody can do if they remove themselves from the equation, It's not about Paula, it's not about Pat. It's about this customer and it's about this need, and somehow connecting the two together and then seeing, okay, fine, is there an opportunity for me to do a business?
It sounds like it's like problem solving first, right? Because for the book, the problem was there was just not a one-stop shop for women to find information about business, right? And then the Candid Conversations there was not a one-stop meeting opportunity for women, and then Kayana there was not a one-stop meeting space for women in business, and so that was a problem that you've solved each of the way through. But I also like what you said about feedback. So how do you collect feedback? What does that mean? Is it surveys? Is it talking to people? What is collecting feedback for you?
Research is extremely, extremely important. So there's so many tools you can use, including just random, I'm always doing WhatsApp polls I have a WhatsApp group of about 149 entrepreneurs. And I'll constantly just, say, what do you guys think of this? What are the tools you're using for X, Y, Z? And that's quick, immediate response. And then you can build up the idea around that. So you have to, I don't know any business that can survive without, some method of feedback from your consumers. You have to, that's just integral. For example, before we had our first Candid, I actually did a survey monkey and sent it out to around maybe 180 women who responded, and to figure out what topics are the most popular pain points for women in business. And some of them you just repeat them, like finance and cash and money. That one you can do even 4 or 5 times because it was top of the feedback that we got. So that's one way in ensuring that the content that you're giving is relevant. So that's one way we've done it in circles. I'll tell you something about bad feedback you'll get immediately.
Yes.
But good feedback sometimes is really hard to come by. And sometimes you just need to know what you're doing right so that you don't change, don't fix it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And sometimes you need good feedback in order to continue to build on or continue to deliver consistently a good product. So bad feedback tends to come in whatever form. Sometimes it's on Twitter. Sometimes it's on Facebook. Sometimes somebody sends it. They will just tell you, man, Patricia, I didn't like this about this event. But good feedback that is integral in building a brand, you sometimes have to reach out and get it from your consumers. But you cannot be scared of asking. You just need to be ready for whatever's going to come.
I want to talk to you about, because the main reason I was like, I have to talk to Pat again is execution. Do you have a process for executing ideas?
So my background is in graphic design, and in graphic design is literally taking complex ideas and simplifying it visually for people to read on the fly, and to understand on the fly. So my mind is already in that space of, if there's a complexity, how do we simplify it and deliver it to market? So yes, my idea is like during this COVID season, I must have had minimum, Paula, maybe 30 ideas.
Yes.
Minimum.
Probably daily. Seriously.
Yes, zooming through my mind. But I tend to, if one keeps coming back, you know how you're like, this one is coming back?
Yeah.
I journal and I write a lot. I mean, I have a notebook. I have like maybe 3 different notebooks. So I'm constantly, distilling information and putting it into my notebook. If I don't have a notebook to write, I'll quickly write it on my phone and revisit it. So you tend to see a pattern. And there's an idea forming, and as it forms, the solution begins to come about. And you'll find that every time you meet somebody in that space, you will be asking interrogative questions to build on this idea, right? And then as a creative, you then begin to form the solution to whatever the problem is. So yes, there is a process that forms, but one of them is as simple as writing them down.
Okay.
And then secondly, I then read ferociously on that topic. You know, I will read from authors that from blog posts to newspaper articles that I've seen. You know, as I said, there's no new idea under the sun. So there's somebody with your idea. There's definitely somebody in some place in Antarctica who's executed it, and you can learn from their mistakes. You know, and then now localize it for our market. So I mean, you have to. There's no luck involved, yeah? It's a science. I mean, so you'll do your research. You will then read up on the topic as much as possible. You will speak to people who are actually doing the work and on the ground are working on it, and then now you'll produce the product. So that process remains the same, but it depends on now an individual, how much sampling do you need? So how many books do you want to read on that subject? Do you want to become a PhD in whatever, organic farming, for example? Do you really want to do that?
Yeah.
Or do you want to aggregate people who are experts within that industry and now read a little bit of what they have done and then move on to the next part of your plan? So I'm like that. As I said, I'm not a perfectionist, so I don't wait for things to be perfect before they come to me. I wouldn't over that. And it's a thing that I encourage anybody who wants to do something new, get over it, because it doesn't matter how perfect it is, you will fail. It will go pear-shaped. You will be embarrassed.
Oh, don't say that.
Get
but
over
it's so
true. You kind of like begin to understand that there's nothing like perfection. You can prepare, and you can prepare for eventualities. And in that preparation is where the perfection now begins to come in, or the excellence, let me put it.
Yeah.
So that a client would be like, oh my gosh, it went wrong, but did you see the speed at which they responded?
Yes.
You understand? Yeah. So I'm not beholden to perfection. What I strive for is excellence. And for me to bring an excellent product to market, I have to have done the work to the best of my abilities.
Okay.
At the time it comes to market. And then now open your ears for feedback and keep improving on it. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing you say is, first of all, journaling is key for when the idea is young, just journaling or writing things down. And then and this is my favorite part, the research, because you're just reading everything and anything about it. Surround yourself with people who are experts. So, and I think also, so what does that mean to you? Do you just reach out to people? And how do you reach out to people? Do you just say, hey, Paula, or I've never met you, can we meet? How do you go about that?
So that's something that I learned quickly when I was doing the book, is I needed entrepreneurs to kind of like trust me with their stories. So I found a kind of like a formula in, when you're talking to a stranger, or usually what you'll do is, for example, because you've done your research, right? You will know which organizations or individuals you would like to approach.
Yes.
And usually I use the rule of 6 degrees of separation. Usually that's exactly what it is. You put it out there. Could anybody do an introduction to Paula Rogo? Yeah.
Because someone always knows someone somehow, some way.
Someone always knows somebody. I'll give you an example. For example, there was a certain author, certain book I had seen on Instagram that I really, really wanted to read, but it wasn't available in any of the shops here, and it wasn't available on Amazon. And it was a South African author. So after maybe a couple of months later, I just thought, let me send a message out to one of my South African mentors, actually. And we were just chatting. We had booked a coaching call. And at the end of the call, she said, okay, so is there anything else that you'd like? And I said, yeah, actually, there is this book and this author, and I know she's South African, and I'd really like to have a couple of copies available locally out of Kayana. And she was like, oh, sure, I know her. I sit on her board and da-da-da-da. And I'd love to. I mean, our call has come to an end, but I'll reach out to you so that you can give me. And immediately she understood what it is I was trying to do. She just sent an email to the author, who responded honestly within 2 minutes. She had sent an email, and she so happened to be coming to Nairobi to see clients and came with a couple of the books, which we then sold out of Kayana. You'll find that somebody is willing to, do the intro for you. So you have to have a backing of your word.
Of course.
In many ways, you have to be an executor.
Yes.
Because if you're going to ask for such a high level, intro, and then you don't do anything on it, then it reflects badly on the person who introduced you.
Yeah, because your reputation, your word is your calling card always at the end of the day. You mentioned that the lady you talked to was a mentor. And I don't know why I was surprised that you have a mentor, but of course it makes sense that you would have a mentor. I don't know why. For me, you're fully formed as you are with wisdom and everything.
It's not even possible.
I know, it's just, it's admiration. It's admiration. Can you speak a little bit to the mentorship or the coaching? What do you get out of that relationship?
So I remember I told you that women, we do things, we learn different, we lead different rather. And this is leading on to that. Because we lead through a nurturing environment, then having a mentor or a coach is a prerequisite to leadership, because that is just naturally how we lead, right? Because I come from a place of extreme abundance, and I just believe there's more than enough resources in this world for every single individual. If we could only believe it, then we would see it happen. I go into many relationships in the same way. I've been very, very, very fortunate to have been introduced to some very accomplished women in an international platform. And as a result of being authentic as well, you find that some of them are drawn to helping you. For example, when I was nominated for an award in Florida known as Enterprising Women, it was one of my mentors who I had met in a cafe in Amsterdam, and she came with her assistant. And as a result of the conversation I had, the assistant was busy taking notes. I was just jabbering away. She then saw an opportunity. She probably saw that, this girl is missing. She is missing international experience, or for her to be affirmed on an international platform that what she's doing is actually relevant to the world. And immediately told me, I'll send you an email. You need to fill it up immediately. You get it. And she didn't say much. So when I received the email, it was an application for this event, which I did. She opened it up specifically for me, sent it out, and I actually got the confirmation that I had been I actually met the criteria to be part of the award ceremony. The next year, I found myself in Florida, and that experience in Florida set me on the journey of a candid handbook for women doing business. So sometimes these people see ahead, where we're second guessing ourselves, and we don't, they know that you have all the tools. She knew that if I just had the opportunity to go to Florida and for these 3 days with these billionaire women who were at that conference, that it was not going to be a wasted opportunity. So she was willing to talk to the person who was the organizer and say, hey, I have this young girl, and I think that she will, this event will be of value to her in the stuff and the plans that she wants to, she has in place. So you need somebody to see that part of the journey for you. You need it to be somebody of abundance who's not like, why should I help you? Because you come and compete with me in this space. And through that, that's where the network of supportive women who are just a phone call away, just a Zoom call, a Skype call. At that time, it was all about Skype away. Excuse me, is extremely important.
So what I'm hearing you say is that...
Sorry, just let me interrupt. There's something that came to my mind, and I always like to mention this.
Yeah.
Because when people are looking for mentors, and I think I've told you this, Paula, before, they don't realize that the mentorship process is driven by the mentee and not the mentor.
Right.
So the initiative always has to come from the person who's desiring to be mentored. So yes, while somebody may say, Paula, I'd like you to be my mentor, you'll be like, fine. But it's not, the onus is not on you to keep reaching out to them. Yeah. The onus is on them to reach out to the mentor.
Yeah.
And from there is where the relationship, and that's not to say that both don't learn from each other, but it's just such that a mentor is usually very busy also on their own life journey.
Yeah.
And what you're trying to do is to plug into it. Yeah.
Just to quickly go back to execution, when you've done the research and you've gotten over yourself in terms of trying to be perfect, when do you actually hit Like, go.
So I'll give you one of the products that we just launched recently is in an area that I have no experience in, which is really health and the medical field. And so I had this idea in my head, coming from my own experience of, my experience with dealing with health practitioners, be it a doctor or when you're going for tests or even just an ophthalmologist or whatever. And from a client's point of view, and I felt that the technician, if you want to call them the doctors or whoever, don't really think through their interactions with us as patients, right? So I felt that I wonder if I could do something around the communication around that area. I think there's something that is to be said. And so I started asking people, help, like doctors. I remember calling a surgeon and saying, I'm thinking of doing this, da, 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 da. Do you think there's a need for that? And initially he was just like, no. And I'm like, really? The one thing that doctors don't have is time, and you keep telling him you're getting them to think through the idea. And through that process, I learned how this product was going to go to market. So by talking to 5, 6, 7 doctors, I realized, okay, this is the route to market for this product. But the thing is, after every call, they would ask, Patricia, that's fantastic. When can I get it? So they kept putting a deadline on me. So sometimes creating deadlines is important. You have to keep your word, and the others, they'll say I'm some charlatan who's coming up with some fake stuff, which I can't afford for them to think of me, because I know I will need this number and this call, this conversation. I'll need to talk to them again, so I can't kill that relationship. So sometimes you need the thing that's going to push you to the fire, to get it out there in whatever form or whatever state it's in. And believe me, people can be very cruel, but people can actually be very forgiving, because even if you bring something that's not half-baked to the market, but the next thing you bring is an improvement of that last thing, you'll find that people are, I see where you're going. I see you took my feedback seriously. I see you're improving on it. So you have to set internal deadlines for yourself. You have to say, by the 1st of January 2021, I need to have produced 3 publications, You need to, and that becomes now the goals with which you're bringing product to market.
The book, for me, the book is a business. So the book, of course, Candid Conversations, Kayana, and then all these other things that are coming up that you've hinted at. What does your daily routine look like?
Okay, just for perspective, is so Willart Productions is a design and production house, right? So we are constantly producing publications even for other people. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it was in terms of Candid Handbook for Women Doing Business and all the magazines that we're producing, Kayana News, Private Practice, Family Matters, Family Business, all those are all produced within within Willart Productions.
Got it.
Conferencing in a Box is a corporate events company. So if you want to have an event around these products, we will use our events company to execute it, to run it. So they're very symbiotic,
Everything
it's just
connects.
The product that the market needs. It all connects. With Kayana, if we're having events, it's our team, our Conference in the Box team, that is going to work and we'll execute those events, from suppliers to vendors. If there's any branding, will be done at Willart. So that it's a complete ecosystem.
Wow.
Within itself. So very, very intentional in that. Remember, if you do things that are just, you're being authentic to yourself, you'll also know that I'm not one to stretch myself thin. Therefore, everything needs to be done within the same sector. Kenya Cottage Industry is the same. It's the same team that executes this event. Every event has an event lead, and that lead will do all the work that pertains to that event, and including which other teams are they working with, who else will they bring on board. There's an event lead that is going to run that. So me as the boss or the leader or the founder is just giving my vision and ensuring that this vision is being passed and being executed as per the vision that we have received. So with that kind of a format, you can do very many things. Remember, we're having almost 30 ideas per second.
Yes.
If you'd like. You can run with them. You can know this one, I can put this team on it, it's viable.
Yeah.
And it has a monetizing aspect, so they'll be able to pay their bills with it.
Yeah.
You push it. And also the good thing about it is seeing somebody else receive your vision and build on it and say, yeah, I get it, Pat. I can do this. I can do that, talking to their own networks and ensuring that it happens.
My mind is actually blown because basically everything you're doing goes under the two Willart and conferencing in a box in one form or another. And that is so smart. That is genius. It's so genius. And so if I was to even go to, say, Circles for Women and the Candid Conversations and say, wow, this is so well run, you can say, oh, conferencing in a box runs this. Why don't you? Yes. Oh my gosh, explosions. Sorry, I've all explosions in my head. That is.
And we also use it as an opportunity to invite potential clients to see how we work.
How you work.
Exactly.
Wow.
So just to say, how do I start my days?
Yeah.
I'm an artist. There's nothing I hate like routine.
Oh gosh. I thought you'd be like, I wake up at 5 and then
I have no formula.
Yeah.
But my day must have certain things in it. It must have a moment to meditate. It must have a moment to pray and some form of physical exercise to clear my mind. So those things will definitely be entwined in a day. Because if I realize if I don't do that, if I go a day without having spent some time, reading my Bible, meditating, I just feel it messes up with the flow of how my thought process is. It'll always be there in the corner. Patricia, you haven't done this.
Yeah.
And if anything happens that goes according, doesn't go according to plan, it'll be like, oh, Pat, it's because you didn't do these things. So I kind of like ensure I do that. I've been slacking on my exercising. I walk a lot. When we were working, I have a personal trainer, so I have to train a minimum of at least 40 minutes in 3 times a week. And that has to happen. So my day has to end. So I have short days and I have long days. And on my short days, my days end pretty early. I don't have meetings generally on those days because in order for me to make sure that I'm able to go and have a full 45 to 1 hour workout with my trainer. So those kind of things, I work things around, I do things around my day. I'm more or less, unless it's my kids' school activities that maybe will disrupt that. I kind of like will keep to that routine, so to speak, and I enjoy it. That's why it doesn't feel like a routine to me. And then I try to make sure that I have an informal evening meeting at least once a week with either somebody I want to get to know a little bit more, whether it's for business or whether I have a product that I feel that could help, whether it's a mentorship session or an exploratory conversation. I try to schedule at least one of those every single week without fail.
Okay. And
that kind of like grows your network, and it's easier for you to sell new ideas or things that you're working on because it has context, because you've also connected with the person at not just in an office or as a pitch.
Yeah.
So I learned that formula works for me very well because I like intimacy and I like to remove people from their office or whatever, and then we can let's have a coffee at the club. And that format works for me. So that's generally, I would say, if you want to know a routine, that would generally be a routine spread out in 5 days, because I only work 5 days in the week, and the weekend is now for family. Yeah.
Excellent. I was really fascinated about your relationship with your husband because you're both entrepreneurial. And how does his love and support play into you and your business, and vice versa? How does your love and support play into his work and his business as well?
So I really, if anybody knows my entrepreneurial journey, they will know that I credit a lot my husband into pushing me into business, sometimes very painfully, giving up opportunities that I felt at that time were important and that I needed to do. But his wisdom in seeing in terms of our relationship and in what he envisioned his life being as a couple. So we have a very, very high respect for each other when it comes to our ideas. One of the things people really feel scared to do when they're in business, especially if you have a spouse who's in employment and you're in business, is that because they need to be an investor, you're really scared of failing because they're probably your first funders. And so you kind of like, it created an environment where failure is part of it. So some of his investments in me were failed immediately,
Yeah.
but it was never brought up as a punishment or like, instead you're like, no, we move on to the next one, so that encourages you as an entrepreneur to keep going. So that open communication is extremely important, and knowing that there's some things that are secret, like you cannot bring in failure of a project that you were doing into your relationship. And also as an entrepreneur, being able to know what risks, the level of risk that you're willing to risk for your family. We hear many stories of entrepreneurs putting even the homes that they live in, taking loans against that, whether in secret or even together. Those are the things that really strain relationships. So you have to know, if this happens, then this is it. We will never, you have to talk about it before it happens.
Yeah.
And hopefully stick to those, the basic rules that you're putting in place. Many times, even as a partner in the business, he never interfered with the operation, so we were never in conflict. And at one point when I really, really wanted him to come in and join me in the business, he just said, Patricia, I really do feel our relationship is of more value than me being involved, in this. So, when somebody says that and then you're like, okay, fine, I'll accept it. And try and soldier on, but he'll still play an advisory role. So communication is like everything.
Thinking back to when you were first starting Willart Productions, over 20 years ago, or 20 years ago, what are...
Imagine 20 years.
Yes, imagine. May we all get there one day. Is 3 tips you would share with yourself back then that would have helped you early on?
Oh, that's a good one. The first one for me is I was just so fearful. And I think that really dragged the process of growth. I was young. So, and then I was extremely fearful of failing and, people just producing a product and then getting feedback. I wish I had done that faster. I wish I had failed faster, and I allowed myself rather to fail faster. The second thing I would certainly do less of, and probably quickly, is getting rid of fake friends.
Oh,
it's a big deal.
Okay.
Yeah, we as women tend to cleave towards, very comfortable. You don't want to, this is my clique. This is a thing. This is an us thing. We're doing things together. But the reality is, if in that clique of 6 or 7 girls, everybody's moving at a different pace, and it can pull you back. It can really pull you back, especially as an entrepreneur. So if you're in a group of women who you're only 2 entrepreneurs and the rest are in corporate, so that means that immediately we graduated from campus. They were busy. They got their company cars, their whatever, and you're still there, really, struggling. It can be very, very discouraging. And I would just say, quickly rid yourselves of, that friend who you feel and sense that they're not really 100% for you. Yeah. You need to release them quickly. Quickly. Yeah, because it will become a hindrance as you advance in your journey as an individual in terms of personal growth, which will of course affect you when it comes to business. Yeah, I would say just be brave enough to believe that you can make new friends even in adulthood. Yeah. You can. It's possible. It's harder, but it's possible. My third point is, of course, in terms of, I talked about it, is just authenticity. And you're not crazy, Pat. You're not crazy to think that there's another way in which things are done. It's not always, you don't always have to follow the tried and tested path. Yeah. Yeah. You don't, I just believe, having a high level of self-belief, I would say. There's no other path. Yes. So it's okay to be a bit awkward, and it's okay to be different, and in fact embrace that, because a lot of the times that is the winning formula to a successful life. Yeah.
Love that. Thank you so much, Pat. Now going into my last segment, which is called a new segment this year called I Know What I'm Doing. And we'll talk just for a few minutes about something that you're great at doing. And of course, it doesn't have to do with work or business. So if I was to ask you, Pat, what is one thing that you are really, really good at? How would you answer that question?
I'm a matchmaker.
What?
I think I would really, if people could trust me, I would, yeah, that's what I would do. I think I'm I'm really good at connecting people, really good at it. And usually the connections work if people just could trust me. Yeah, we've had incidences of people who are hiring, and I'm like, that person is going to be such a bad fit for your organization. In fact, he is the best fit. And not even within months, they just call me back. You were right. You were right. I didn't lean into that skill set for what, maybe just, I don't know, for whatever reason. Maybe I was just young and I didn't understand. But even bad relationships, I can just, it's like, oh my God, I can just tell.
Yeah.
This, you know how you'd want to tell your girlfriend, just walk away, or tell your boyfriend, walk away,
Yeah.
But and I think with age, I'm more confident about it, because sometimes you're like, oh, maybe it's just me, my insecurities. No. But now with time, I'm just like, I know it, I feel it, and you find 5-6 years later, somebody's like, oh, it was wrong from the beginning, and I'm like, yeah, I could have told you that,
Can you give me an example of when you've match made?
No, actually, this is the one that is creepy, but I have to tell you this one.
Okay.
I have somebody who came to see me looking for a job, right? Okay. He was told, my nanny in the house, actually, that was her nephew, and she was just like, oh, Mama Kaya, please, my nephew is looking for work. Tell him to come and see. I told him, tell him to come and see me on Tuesday, let's say next week or something like that. And the Tuesday of that week, he then comes to see me in my office, and I was really busy. I was completely distracted. But I was just like, okay, so what's your name? You know how you're just talking to these guys, trying to get a sense and feel of them, because of course that's how I'm able to match people. And he then says, he said, I'm looking for a job. What job? Any job. You know how Africans were like, any job will do. And I'm like, no, my dear, it doesn't work like that for me. You have to tell me if you had an opportunity to do without your need and the situation that you're in, what would you really like to do? Because I don't believe dreams are a preserve of the privilege. I think anybody should be able to dream. So he then says, you know what I would really like to do? I'd really like to be a mechanic. Honestly, I would really, that's, if I could choose a job, I want to work with cars and mechanics. And I was like, great, thank you very much. You've told me that. I'll be in touch. No sooner has he left my office, he hadn't even reached the gate. At the time, the garage where I would fix my car, the owner had called me and says, hey, Pat, I'm really looking for, because he knows that I matchmake, I guess. I'm really looking for somebody to join my team. I just want an honest guy, somebody who's not going to steal from me. Can you believe it? Honestly, I just told him, hold on. And I went to my window and I was screaming, the guy saying, So I then get them to talk on the phone, and they agree where they're going to meet, etc. And then I get the phone back, and I'm telling you, I kid you not, to this day, that guy is not even my mechanic anymore, because I co-signed with him on other things. Yeah. But this guy still works for him.
Wow.
To date.
Wow. Okay, then we now know. Guy, everyone listening, call Pat. She's read this. We might as well start this matchmaking business now. Call her now. She knows someone. Tell her exactly what you need. I love that. Pat, mentor in my head. I appreciate you for always taking my calls, always being willing to meet with me, never thinking I'm crazy when I tell you an idea or something that I'm working on. I just appreciate you. One of my favorite people that I've met since I moved back. Thank you again for giving me your time and energy for the podcast.
Thank you so much, Paula. And just you keep doing what you're doing, aiming for excellence. I love it.
Amazing. How many times did I say wow in this interview? And could you tell there was moments where I was just in awe? I was like, I used the word genius. I never used the word genius. And I think that was because there were so many aha moments in this interview for me. She shared so much beyond the business. She shared about her communication and relationship with her husband and how that connects with the business. She talked about friendship. She talked about just life and balance. And so thank you, Pat, again, for being so open. And I look forward to interviewing you again sometime in the future, because this is not your last time on this show. A lot of things have been mentioned in the interview and even before that. Everything is in the show notes, so check them out if you ever need links. Also, I have a favor to ask. I'd love for you to subscribe to the podcast if you're listening. If you've listened to more than one episode, you might as well go ahead and subscribe. Also forward it to a friend who might benefit from this interview, because Pat shared a lot, and I'm sure there's someone in your life who would benefit. And that's it. Next week is a Money Matters episode. So this is the once a month episode where we get to talk about money, the moolah. And I can't wait to connect with you in the Facebook group. It's slowly growing and I'm trying to put out more content in there. Can't wait to talk to you next week. So be it. See to it.